at 4:15. Then at 5 o'clock, we've got Brandon Weichert coming on. Brandon is an associate fellow of Oxford University. He is a national security expert and also a good friend and somebody who writes frequently for American Greatness, where you can see him. I think Brandon writes with two hands, one on each keyboard, so they can get two articles going at any one time, because he writes for us at American Greatness probably 3 or 4 times a week, and it's always smart, it's always good, it's always well written, and he's got. He has been following something that has been submerged in the news with everything else going on with regard to Obamacare, with immigration, with the rollout of the new executive order on immigration, all the other things going on in Washington. There's actually been important national security news going on, particularly vis-a-vis China and North Korea, and Brandon will be reporting in on that for us at 5 o'clock. And we'll be taking calls. In fact, I want to let you know.
.com. Seth Leibson, Chris Buskirk. It's principles and politics. The Seth and Chris Show is on now.
Welcome back to the Seth and Chris Show, final hour before the weekend. Hope it finds you well. Hope that your week went well, and if not, and even if so, I hope the weekend goes a whole lot better. As promised, we are joined by Brandon Weichert. Brandon is a national security expert and a frequent contributor to American Greatness. Brandon, thanks for joining us on this Friday afternoon.
Oh, no, thank you for having me on again.
It is my pleasure, despite the fact that the calls were running 10-1 against having Brandon Weichert back on the show. I decided to overrule the listeners and have you anyway.
Oh. Well, you elitist.
Right, exactly. Look, we're doing it the DC way. We do what we want here. We don't care what the pesky voters or listeners, customers want. We just do it our way. Brandon, you are pretty close to the belly of the beast. Am I wrong?
Yeah. I think you're not wrong. I think it's fair to say I'm pretty close to it. Yeah, I can feel the heat from it.
the pulse, the pulsing heart with beating out the drum of impending doom.
Yeah.
Brandon, you wrote a really interesting piece earlier in the week for American Greatness with regards to what's going on between China and North Korea. Could you flesh that out a little bit?
Yeah. Well, basically, early. I think now it was last weekend. China floated this concept that they would use their ability to coax North Korea to act a certain way, in this case get them to promise to discontinue development of the nuclear weapons program, if we, with the South Koreans, opted not to do our annual military exercises that we do like clockwork every year. And this, as I wrote in the article, I thought it was probably had something to do with the fact that, as some of you may know, a month ago, 2 months ago, Kim Jong-un, the leader of North Korea, had his brother, Kim Jong-nam, assassinated. And what many people may not know is that Kim Jong-nam, although he renounced his claim to the, North Korean throne, if you will, basically he was protected by the Chinese. And the theory in many circles is that the Chinese were priming him to be the replacement for Kim Jong-un because they view Kim Jong-un as both too inexperienced and far too volatile. Kim Jong-un has been killing all the pro-Chinese elements of the North Korean inner circle. And so that's kind of what was going on. And I think the Chinese are trying to figure out a way to change the regime in North Korea without precipitating an American invasion of North Korea, because they worry about a unified democratic Korea on their border.
Brandon, can you explain what the practical relationship is between China and North Korea? I think the general understanding people have is that North Korea is at least in part a client state of China, but also is, whether this is by design or not, it also displays a disturbing degree of unpredictability.
Yeah, and I think actually it's funny. One of my mentors at the Institute of World Politics in Washington D.C., Dr. Marek Hodakevich, he just gave a lecture yesterday that I went to, and he made a comment in his lecture on how he viewed North Korea. He said it was not unlike the Soviet Union's relationship with Albania during the Cold War, and basically what that was an allusion to was if you remember, the Albanians were kind of the wild card for the Soviets. They would always kind of deploy them onto the world stage to keep everybody distracted and to kind of make it look like, well, the Soviets are the sane ones, and we can rely on them to keep other members of the Iron Curtain in check. And I get the sense that the relationship with China and North Korea is actually a lot closer, or at least it has been since the Korean War, than most people are willing to admit, and that I think that China uses North Korea as a kind of strategic lever whenever relations with the West get a little too tense. And so in this case, they're very concerned, China is, about how Donald Trump is going to do trade deals with China. They're concerned about, as I said, a unified Korean peninsula. They're really worried about North Korea collapsing because that means there's going to be a flood of refugees coming across the Chinese border, which they view as destabilizing for their country. So I think they're trying to keep America off balance, and they do that by encouraging behind the scenes the North Korean activities that we're seeing. I also think, though, you might be right. I think the general assumption is that North Korea is unhinged, and that China may actually be trying to just channel North Korea's madness away from China and to its pro-American neighbors, kind of a game of nuclear hot potato, so that's the relationship, and I think that China really enjoys seeing America try to deal with this unstable dictatorship in the North.
How much influence or control do you or people who follow these things very closely? How much control or influence do we think that China has over North Korea? I think under Kim Jong-il, and certainly under Kim Jong-il's father. I'm drawing a blank on his name now. But certainly under the father and the grandfather, they had a lot more control. There was very little daylight. I do think Kim Jong-un is really kind of a wild card, and I think that he is, I think that they have control in the sense that they are able to they're the exclusive almost exclusive trading partner with North Korea. They supply all the luxury goods that the North Korean elite enjoy. You mean like bread?
Yeah. Well, the North Korean elite live a lot differently, especially the Kim family, than the rest of the country. They have beautiful cars. They have a wine. They have wonderful. They have a very different standard of living. So they provide a lot of those luxury goods, and in many ways, the North Koreans depend economically on China. It is really a one-sided relationship, generally speaking. I know China gets a lot of anthracite for its coal from North Korea, and to be fair to China, they have said they're not going to import anthracite, which is kind of a big deal. It signals, I think, that the Chinese are trying to figure out what to do with Kim Jong-un because they don't think they can control him the way they could his father or his grandfather. And so I think that North Korea is a client state. I think there's a little less daylight between them and China than popular media suggests, but I do think Kim Jong-un is kind of out there. And if I may posit quickly, I've been really thinking about this, and call me crazy, and I've been called crazy before, but I'm wondering if maybe maybe this is Kim Jong-un killing his pro-Chinese uncle, Kim Jong-un killing his pro-Chinese half-brother, Kim Jong-un killing these 4 guys with the artillery battery that he just killed last week, who I believe were associated with this pro-Chinese group in the North Korean regime. I'm actually wondering if this is some ham-fisted attempt on the part of Kim Jong-un to maybe have some kind of opening, a diplomatic opening with the U.S., and with the Trump administration. Maybe he's signaling in his own way, saying, hey, I'm going after the Chinese. Maybe we can make a deal now, Mr. Art of the Deal, Donald Trump. I don't know. It's a crazy thought, but I've been kind of thinking about, maybe he isn't as crazy as we think. Maybe it's all an act.
This is the John Hinckley theory of trying to get attention of your paramour. You shoot the president in order to impress Jodie Foster.
Yeah, it's funny. Even the insane have a certain logic to them. Who knows? I don't know. It's something that I keep thinking about. But in all probability, though, it is likely that he's just unstable, and the Chinese they want to have that North Korean lever to pull whenever issues with the West arise. But in all likelihood, they are probably trying to figure out how they can get rid of him and still keep North Korea away from unifying with the South.
Brandon, what does this mean for the United States? What is this, and for our ally in South Korea? Patrick Buchanan, you may have seen, wrote a piece. I think it was yesterday or today, wondering aloud if recent actions might precipitate a missile crisis on the Korean Peninsula. Maybe you can give me just a quick response to that, because we've got about 40 seconds left to go, and then give a fuller response on the other side of the break.
Well, I think absolutely you're already seeing a crisis starting, and in fact, I think there's going to be some kind of a war very soon if things continue on the trajectory that they are.
A war between North and South Korea?
Yeah, which will, of course, bring in the U.S., China, probably Russia, definitely Japan. I think you're looking at a very serious problem, and no one's really acknowledging the severity of this problem. This is not business as usual.
Brandon, that is what we call in the radio business a teaser, because we are going to go to this break, and I want you to flesh that out on the other side. But we'll be right back with more of Brandon Weichert after this message. Welcome back to the Seth and Chris Show, joined by Brandon Weichert. Brandon is a national security expert living in or near Washington, D.C., undisclosed location, I think deep underground, right, Brandon?
Yes.
Frequent contributor to American Greatness. And you left us at the end of the last segment with, I couldn't have scripted the tease any better than you did, because you are telling us that there is a disturbingly high likelihood of armed conflict, maybe outright war on the Korean Peninsula. Please, tell us more.
Yeah, so basically in my assessment, and I understand that certain other people are going to try to, having said that, they're going to try to equivocate. I do think that we are right now, given the fact that there is so much uncertainty in the international order, particularly in Asia right now, I do think we are closer to having an armed conflict over Korea between the North and the South than we've probably been in since at least 1994, when the Clinton administration supposedly toyed with attacking North Korea when initially it was discovered that they were developing nuclear weapons. And, of course, the Clinton administration pulled back when Colin Powell, then Joint Chief of Staff, said it would cost $1 trillion and involve 1 million American men and probably 100,000 Americans injured or killed in combat. So they pulled back. But this is where what we're facing right now, particularly in light of the fact that the current president of South Korea has just been impeached, and it would seem that her liberal adversaries, political adversaries, are going to likely be the people who take over in 60 days after they have a special election in the country.
Which means what for this situation? So
basically, in the long run, the Liberal Party is in South Korea. They favor open, more stable, more peaceful relations with the North, but as we saw with the Sunshine Policy about a decade ago, when the South tried to do limited trade with and set up factories in the North Koreans, they used the South for getting money, and then they never ever went anywhere beyond that. They never yielded any peace agreement, and so basically, and until that transition happens in 60 days, there's going to be a lot of uncertainty on the peninsula. And with Kim Jong-un in North Korea doing these missile launches almost weekly now, we know, for instance, in 2006, it is widely agreed upon among the intelligence community in the West that the North Korean regime does have rudimentary nukes, and these missiles they've been lobbing into the Sea of Japan they're attempting to get better ranges on their delivery systems, the missiles for those nukes, in an attempt to eventually be able to hit the Pacific Northwest of the United States and in Canada. And so I really think that we are in a very precarious position because of the uncertainty of what's going on in South Korea's domestic political system, the uncertainty that China feels. They don't know how Trump is going to react. They want to keep Trump at bay, so they may be looking at notions of regime change in the North, putting a pro-China kind of stooge in the North to replace Kim Jong-un. Russia's starting to try to intervene. As you know, they are nominally aligned with the North. And Japan, of course, is these missiles that the North have been testing are flying right over Japan. And they're already a little trigger-happy between China constantly poking them and then Russia now trying to take the Kuril Islands, being intransigent on that dispute with Japan. So there's a lot of kind of tension right now that could boil over in this uncertain period.
And so, how does this affect the United States?
Well, it affects us in the sense that we have made agreements with the South that we will assist them should the North start anything. Also, we are economically tethered to the region, and basically, if the North decides to start something, they don't even really need nukes to wipe out a large chunk of Seoul, the capital of South Korea. They have, I think, 45,000 artillery shells that can basically set fire to the entire city within, I think, a half hour. It's insane the amount of conventional forces they have primed to just, flood across that border.
Right, and people don't, I think, if you're not up on this subject, you don't realize just how close Seoul is to the border with the North.
Yeah, mere miles. It's a hop, skip. It's from here, it's from Alexandria probably to, Charlottesville, where University of Virginia is, which is I think an hour or two away. It's not that far. And we're talking military invasions here. That's dangerous. So it could very well affect America in the sense that we will invariably, not unlike the First Korean War, get sucked in to having to defend. Not to mention the fact that we have, I think, 25 or 28,000 troops currently stationed in South Korea who will undoubtedly be targets in the opening salvo of any North Korean attack. And so if we lose guys on the ground, even if we don't want to intervene, we will have to intervene to protect what forces we have in that country and to also, defend our honor, defend our interests in that region. And so that is how it will affect us, not to mention the deleterious impact on the global economy, since South Korea is such an integral player in Asia, and Asia is such a dynamic economic force.
Right. Okay. I want to switch gears on you a little bit. Before I do that, let me ask you this. First of all, do you have a little bit more time? Because we're going to go to a break in a second. Okay. That's number one. Number two is, would you take calls?
Yeah, I can. Yeah, I'd love to.
Good. Okay. So anybody who has questions about this or other matters of national security, foreign policy, give us a ring at 602-508-0960. Brandon Weichert is joining us. He is a national security expert and a frequent contributor to American Greatness. Brandon, here is where I wanted to switch gears with you. I was fascinated that you were writing about the dynamic on the Korean Peninsula, particularly vis-a-vis the relationship between China and North Korea at a time when all eyes in this country really are focused on Washington, D.C. There's of course, is a political battle, a war really going on between left and right, and at the meta level, but also that we've got the Obamacare replacement rollout this week, and so we are, of course, very focused on that as Americans while these other things are playing out. But about a week ago, you wrote something on this subject as well, which I wanted to give you the opportunity to expand upon. You said, nationalism never died, we just ignored it. And again, we've got about a minute before the break, so you've got plenty of time on the other side of this break to explain this. But you write this. You write, the rise of Donald Trump, last year's Brexit vote, or the rise of the alternative right parties, such as Germany's Alternative for Deutschland and France's National Front parties, all represent nationalistic movements. They may take different forms, but the concept of globalism has taken a pretty serious hit these last few years. In this morass, the globalists in the West continue to warn against the dangers of returning to nationalism, but all of this talk is self-serving. Looking at the way nationalism has taken hold through the world, the question arises, did nationalism ever really go away? I think your answer is no, but we're going to go to this break, and then I'd love to have you explain that a bit more, because I think you are onto something that explains a lot about what's been going on in this country over the past few years. Also want to remind everybody that the lines are open, 602-508-0960. Feel free to give us a call with questions for Brandon Weichert.
And I won't back down. Hey, baby.
Welcome back to the Seth and Chris Show. We still have on the line with us Brandon Weichert. He is a national security expert and is a frequent contributor to American Greatness, where he writes about national security, but not just that. Wrote a compelling piece on the wave of nationalist or patriotic spirits that have taken hold across the West, meaning Western Europe, the United States, and some of the other countries we would associate with the West and the Anglosphere. Before we do that, Brandon, I wanted to remind everybody that we are taking calls. Brandon has generously said that he would be happy to take questions, 602-508-0960. And in that vein, we have Ryan in Mesa who has a question for Brandon about Korea. Ryan, welcome to the Seth and Chris Show.
Hey there, how's it going?
Going well.
Very well.
Thanks for taking my call. I've got a question for you, Brandon. So you say that a conflict on the peninsula is pretty much, the highest point it's been since 1994. Obviously, the difference in countries between what we've seen over, I'm 45 now, so I've a live television war. We've seen the Gulf War, Iraq, Afghanistan. We're looking more at a standard, more like a World War II type situation where there's uniforms fighting uniforms, but at this, rather than insurgents and things. How difficult, being that the size of Korea and the fact that we have way more technology than they do, would it be in ending something with the least amount of casualties and things like that? Is that something that it seems like that the fact that North Korea is so much smaller, that it would be more easier, although they have the nuclear weapons. They have a lot of people, but I'm wondering if it would be like Iraq, where the soldiers gave up immediately once their leader was gone.
Thank you for your question. And the first thing I would say is it would probably, God forbid, if this is not something that we should be hoping for or anything like that. But if it did happen, it would actually be a very difficult conflict, just because, if you look at the Korean War, actually the similarities between the beginning of war, how the U.S. Army was positioned, how the overall U.S. military, we were kind of standing down after World War II. We kind of weren't, we weren't really thinking, we were thinking about the Soviets, of course, but really weren't oriented toward fighting the kind of war that was needed to be fought on the Korean Peninsula. So in much the same way, today we are very focused on Islamic terrorism, rolling around in the desert, and that kind of a conflict. And also we're very worried about Russia in Eastern Europe. we're not really focused on, even though we talk about the pivot, let's face it, the Obama pivot was a disaster, didn't accomplish anything that it was supposed to. So in that way, we're not positioned well. We've got about 28,000 guys on the, in the Korean Peninsula, and they're basically, they can take care of themselves, yes, but you're talking about a massive North Korean army that is itching to go, and they're going to have some certain advantages in terms of in the sense that it's near their homeland, and the fact that the big defense for America and South Korea is going to be trying to protect Seoul, which is that's going to be a bear. But in terms of the type of combat, it is not necessarily only going to be a kind of conventional war that you're talking about. Remember, since the 1970s, the North Koreans have an incredibly large and well-trained special forces contingent of their military, which are trained in asymmetrical warfare. The North Koreans were practicing asymmetrical warfare before we ever started talking about it, in the context of Russia and China and the jihadis today. So that there is some concern that you're going to have some fifth column type action going on, whereby the North may have and may try to smuggle unconventional fighters behind enemy lines to conduct operations there to keep us off balance, the South Koreans off balance as well. And so it will be, we can win. I mean, we are able to beat them. But the problem is going to be the cost and the ferocity. I mean, just look at the first Korean War and look at the fact that the Clinton administration in '94 was very seriously looking into punishing North Korea militarily, potentially even toppling that regime, and they bugged off because they realized the sheer manpower and the cost involved, and that was during a good economic time. It was just, and that was during America's unipolar dominance of the world. Now we're being challenged. And we have to worry about China. What's China going to do? Are they going to side with us, or are they going to try to protect their client?
Brandon, we're gonna go to a break. We've got more calls holding that I want to get to. Brian, thanks very much for that call. I appreciate that. Brandon, we've got more calls for you, so please stick with us. If you want to get on the line with Brandon Weichert, national security expert, give us a call, 602-508-0960. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Seth and Chris Show, joined by Brandon Weichert, national security expert extraordinaire. Not too high of praise for Brandon, who's also a frequent contributor at American Greatness and an increasingly frequent guest on this program. Before we get to calls, and I do want to encourage those of you who have questions for Brandon to give us a ring at 602-508-0960. Got some calls holding, but I do have space for one more. Before we get to calls, though, I do want to just note something that came across the wire earlier, which I know will cheer many supporters of conservative politics and of the president, which is that Attorney General Jeff Sessions has asked 46 Obama-era U.S. attorneys to resign. This is part and parcel of the house cleaning that is so desperately needed inside of the executive branch. These are the type of people who were appointed by Obama and have been doing their level best to undermine the president. It's about time to start that clean out of the Obama-era people and start to bring in the Trump people. Brandon, we're going to go to calls now if you're good to go on that.
Ready to go.
Excellent. Steve in Tempe, thanks for holding. Welcome to the Seth and Chris Show. You're on with Brandon Weichert.
Hi, Chris. Hi, Brandon.
Hi.
Question I had was in regards to North Korea. I remember hearing that North Korea is one of the most prominent countries in the world as it relates to chemical weapons. And I know that we've got, I think the number I've heard, 30,000 troops on that border with South Korea and North Korea, and that those troops would be in jeopardy if the war was ever started, mainly because of that chemical weapon or chemical warfare expertise North Korea apparently has. Is that a fact or no?
Yeah, well, just like their nuclear program, I think it's an unacknowledged fact. I would just like to stress that the U.S. military, our guys are trained very well to withstand that kind of attack with chemical weapons. I had buddies who went into Iraq in the initial invasion in '03, and they told me that there were multiple occasions when they were going up into Baghdad when they were told to put on their chemical masks because the concern was that the Republican Guard in Iraq was going to start popping off. In fact, I have a buddy who was a Ranger who said that there was a unit of Republican Guard that was popping off mustard gas at his unit as they were advancing toward Baghdad. So our guys are trained. And I don't want to underplay this, though. I mean, that is a threat. I do believe that and I do have it on relatively good authority that they have some chemical weapons, bioweapons capability. And again, in 2006, Tony Blair has even said this. Of course, his credibility may not be as good as it once was, but many people, not just in America but around the world, who should know, have come out and said that 2006. We know that they tested a rudimentary nuclear weapon. And by the way, there's another thing that I neglected to point out in my article due to constraint word count issues. But there is a whole other issue of Iran. Iran and North Korea are partnered in the nuclear development and nuclear weapons development, and you can rest assured, or not rest assured, but be very concerned that there are Iranian nuclear scientists learning at the feet of these North Korean scientists, and vice versa in Iran with North Korean scientists there. And it will be very interesting to see. I had a meeting with somebody about a week ago, and we were talking about this, and they brought up it's very unfortunate if we have to find out the hard way, but how will Iran react if we, God forbid, do have to go full on and take out the North Korean regime militarily? And that's very scary. But yes, they do have, I believe, chemical weapons, bioweapons, and a rudimentary nuclear weapons capability. And yes, it is a threat to our troops. No, though, it is not entirely destructive to our troops. We are trained. They are trained. We train them well how to withstand it, and we will be able to get in the fight, basically.
All right, Steve, does that answer the question that you had?
It does. And real quick, I just wanted to ask Brandon, how likely, you said nuclear on the nuclear side, how likely is it that you think we could see a strike? I mean, I don't see Donald Trump standing for what's been going on recently. How likely is it you think we're going to see a strike against their nuclear capability in the next year?
Well, I know for a fact that at the DOD they have talked very seriously, and in fact, the New York Times, if you can believe it, actually I think had a really good article on this last week. I know for a fact the DOD has been looking at maybe selective preemptive strikes. For instance, if they put up a missile on this on a launch pad and we detect it, we'll deploy stealth, an F-35 JSF or one of our stealth birds to go in there and knock out that missile on the platform to send a message. Of course, the problem is how will North Korea react? How will China react? But I would argue, I think you're right, Donald Trump at some point, given his personality and given the fact that he is not going to take this stuff from the North Koreans, from some tin pot, 2-bit third world dictator like Kim Jong-un. I think we are looking at very serious attempts at using military force, however limited, to send a message to the North that, hey, we're not going to tolerate this. And one more other quick thing. We are seriously thinking about allowing or encouraging the Japanese and potentially the South Koreans to begin looking into nuclear arms development. Just the fact that we would even admit that in public should send shockwaves through Beijing, and that might prompt them to actually work toward a unification scenario. Because right now they don't support unification of the Korean Peninsula, but if they know that Japan and South Korea may be getting nukes and that we're going to intensify bombing of North Korea and that we're going to maybe beef up our force presence on the Korean Peninsula in a kind of a beginning phase of maybe moving toward attacking North Korea, China might decide finally to use their power to work with the U.S. fully and resolve this issue before it comes to full-on war.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. You know, Brandon, I mean, this is the issue, right? I mean, this is what people have talked about with nuclear proliferation for decades, which is that once the genie's out of the bottle, proliferation of nuclear weapons spawns more proliferation. So when you see the United States saying in public to countries, allies like South Korea and like Japan, you know, maybe it's time you start to arm yourselves in response to the nuclear weapons that are pointed at you by places like North Korea. It's a natural response, but we never wanted to get here in the first place,
right.
which was always the argument for making sure that in North Korea either didn't develop nuclear weapons, or if they did, that capability was destroyed.
Well, we are living with the failure of not just the will of predominantly Democratic, but Republican as well, administrations to A, enforce nuclear proliferation, B, look cogently at nuclear proliferation. For instance, the fact that India has a nuke is not as bad of a concept as the fact that Pakistan may have a nuke, given
That's
the
right.
cultural. You know, we don't look at it, we just kind of have this one-size-fits-all. And then also the failure of the Truman administration in Korea, the failure of the Truman administration
To finish the job.
To finish the job, and then also to not allow China to go communist. I mean, we are dealing right now with the failures, 50 years of failures from the left.
And whenever you kick the can, the bill just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Brandon, hold on. We got to run to a break, then we're going to come back for our final segment. We've got time for a couple more calls. We'll be right back with Brandon Weichert.
Coffee beans grow by the billions, so they've got to find those extra cups to fill.
Little Frank Sinatra on your way home this Friday afternoon. Hope that helps you ease into that weekend frame of mind, because all of Brandon's cheery talk about war on the Korean Peninsula probably isn't cheering anyone up right now. But it is what it is, as we say, right, Brandon?
Yeah, that's right. And real quickly, there is hope. I really do believe that a Trump presidency opens a whole retinue of possibilities that another politician, Republican or Democrat, would never have been able to look at in terms of resolving these issues without war.
Brandon, strength makes war less likely, not more likely.
Yes, I think Rumsfeld said it best. If I may quote Rummy, he said, weakness is provocative and strength deters.
That's exactly right. He's not the first one to think that, and it's
not.
absolutely right. I want to grab one more call before the show comes to its conclusion. Steve in Scottsdale, welcome to the show. You're on with Brandon Weichert.
Hey, thank you very much. Your show is great. I appreciate you guys coming on. You've saved afternoon radio for sure. Have good salient talk about issues. But
well, thanks, Steve. You're my new favorite listener.
Well, good. Then I'll expect to get right through next time. Brandon, I wonder how subject are we to exposure for not necessarily the Pacific Northwest or U.S. military bases in Japan, et cetera, but how about Hawaii, i.e. a modern-day Pearl Harbor, where they take out a significant part of our Pacific fleet and thereby disabling our ability to respond? It just seems like it's never really mentioned, and, history tends to repeat itself. So just wondering what your idea is on that.
That's an interesting point. I didn't even think about that, and I kind of do this for a living. So, that's an excellent point. This is the problem with them testing these missiles constantly unabated.
Brandon, is this the subject of your next contribution to American greatness?
I think I might have to credit Steve, and I'm going to start probably diving into the research right after I get off the phone with you. Maybe make a few calls to some colleagues of mine at some of the think tanks. I do think, though, he raises an excellent point. We have not acknowledged that while these missile tests that they're doing, sure, it's kind of funny they keep going into the ocean, but if you look at it, they keep getting farther and farther and farther out before they crash. And so while we can all kind of laugh and go, oh, look how far away it is, if you're standing in Hawaii, you might be going, well, geez, it's getting closer and closer and closer. And I'm from Florida originally, raised in Florida. They used to say even a blind pig can find its slop bowl once in a while, and that is the concern with all of these missile tests. And so, yes, Hawaii is a big threat, and nobody talks about it or thinks about it enough, and Steve is right to be concerned.
Steve, thanks for that call. I am going to be looking for a new piece from Brandon on that, and I hope it gives Steve credit. Thanks for the call, Steve. Have a good weekend, everybody. Brandon, excellent as always. We'll have to have you back again real soon. That does it for the Seth and Chris Show for this week. We'll be back at our same bat time on this same bat channel, 3 o'clock Monday. Got some great guests coming up. Hopefully, we're going to have Speaker Paul Ryan on either Monday or Tuesday to answer some questions about his replacement of Obamacare.
Consult your tax professional before investing.